A lot of players are terrified of getting zeroed. Honestly, I think they're exactly the same thing. If somebody told me I was about to lose a huge amount of troops tomorrow, I would probably spend the entire day preparing shields, moving cities, moving my resources, checking some reports I'm doing, and making sure it never happened. Because when we think about account damage, we usually imagine one giant disaster, one massive battle, one terrible decision, one report that make you stare at your screen wondering what just happened. But recently I saw a comment that completely changed how I look at Kingdom Wars. The player said, "The zeroing was not bad, it was the constant refill that will catch you off guard." And the more I thought about it, the more I realized he might be right. Because when kingdom collapse, it's rarely because one huge fight. It's usually because of hundreds smaller one. Think about it. If you get zeroed once, it hurt. Nobody's arguing. You lose troops, you lose resources, you lose time, you lose progress. But at least you know exactly what happened. The damage is visible. You can look at the report, you can calculate the losses, you can make a recovery plan. The problem is that constant refill don't feel dangerous. At least not at first. You lose some troops, you refill, you heal, you retrain, you spend more speed ups, you spend more resources, then you do it again and again and again. And after a few weeks, something strange starts happening. Your account still looks strong, but your reserves you're having are disappearing. And that's when I start noticing something interesting. When players talk about Kingdom Strange, they usually talk about power. Top 1 kingdom power, top 2 kingdoms, strong wells, big accounts, huge troop count, but almost nobody talk about exhaustion, and exhaustion is invisible. You cannot see the ranking, you cannot see it in matchmaking, you cannot see it in the kingdom power. A kingdom can look incredibly strong while secretly running out of everything. And honestly, I think that is where a lot of players make a mistake because they look at the outside. Veteran players look at the reserves. Then I start thinking about some of the strongest kingdom I ever see. And something felt weird. The kingdoms that survived the longest weren't always the kingdom that won the biggest battles. Sometimes they weren't even the kingdoms with the biggest spenders. They were the kingdoms that knew when to stop spending resources. They know when to avoid pointless fights. They know when a battle was worth taking. And more importantly, they know when a battle was not worth taking. That's a completely different way of thinking because most players ask, can we win this fight? Veteran players often ask, is this fight worth the cost? Those are very different questions. And this creates another realization. Maybe troop losses are not actually the resource we're running out of. Maybe troops are just the things we notice. What we're really losing is everything behind the troops. This is speed ups, this is healing, this is retraining, this is resources, the event opportunities, the future flexibility, because every refill is basically borrowing from your future account. And at first it feels fine, then suddenly at important event arrive, a major war starts, or migration opens, or a kingdom matchmaking appear that actually matter. And that's when players discover they have nothing left. Not because they got zeroed, because they spent months bleeding resources without realizing it. This also explains something I've noticed in a lot of wars. Sometimes a kingdom loses a huge battle and everyone immediately declares them dead. Then 2 weeks later, they are completely fine. Meanwhile, another kingdom keep fighting every day. Small battles, small losses, small refills, nothing dramatic. Then suddenly they disappear. Their field presence drop. Their activity drops. their rallies slow down, their participation falls, and everyone wonder what happened. What happened was death by thousands refuse. The damage never looks scary enough to stop until it's too late. And honestly, I think this creates change how players should evaluate their accounts. Because if your only goal is avoiding zero, you might still be destroying your account. You can technically survive every battle. You can technically win every exchange. You can technically stay active every day and still end up weaker because not every lose appears inside a battle report. Some losses only show up months later. That's probably the biggest thing I took away from this discussion. Most players are afraid of explosion. Veteran players are afraid of leak. The explosion gets all the attention. The leak quietly empties the account. And the longer I play those kingdom building games, the more I think the leak is usually what kills players first. But I'm curious what you think. Have you ever had a season where the constant refuse end up hurting your account more than any single battle? Or do you still think getting zeroed is the biggest danger? Let me know in the comments, because honestly, the more I look at the Kingdom Wars, the more I think players are afraid of wrong things.